Hello guys, welcome back. I've been a bit under the weather. I do not like humidity at all. But this came in 8 Days of Luke. So I'm going to give you a review, and it's going to be spoiler heavy because I can't stand how people that write about Loki said, oh, I really like this book, and they tell you absolutely nothing about it. First, it's from 1975. So if you're wondering why David? Yeah, David does not go to the internet and look up things. That's why. Once upon a time, the internet didn't exist, and he didn't know who the gods were because, one, they do a pretty good job of disguising themselves in the book, and two, you didn't have like all the Marvel stuff back then you have now. You didn't have Neil Gaiman writing American Gods and having stuff on TV, on cable. You didn't have the internet to go buy hundreds of books. You didn't have any of that. If you had teaching in school or you had something in your local library, you were lucky. And I'm even talking like from my time in the 80s, you just didn't have all the stuff you have now. Okay, and if you're wondering what the difference between a children's book and an adult book is, I can tell you since I actually majored in writing. The only difference is what content you can put in and what you can't. If you're going to try to get a children's book published, you probably don't want to have 4 letter words on every page, even though most kids today talk like pirates. You probably don't want to have too much adult activities such as violence and baby making. Other than that, you're free to go. Once you start adding stuff like it in, you go up in age brackets. Because adults care about children and we don't want to warp their little minds forever by having inappropriate stuff. Like this book dodges around it. If somebody curses, they say they said a bad word. So they dodge around it. So there's no curse words in it. It's not a skullduggery pleasant by any means. There's not all the violence and everything. I should think it's aimed at any reader that could read it. Adults seem to like it as well. I don't know if some of the adults who like it had it earlier. I've never come across it except for like several years ago. I heard it mentioned. And it's really good. The same author did Howl's Moving Castle, so you might know the author. And in it, David ends up letting Luke free by total accident. He means to curse his totally atrocious family, which is pretty much stock in a lot of children's literature. And instead of cursing the family, he sets Luke free, and he has no idea who this young boy is. And as the novel progresses, his family gets worse and worse and worse. So he has one person the family gets a better relationship with. And he and Luke have to be careful because he can summon Luke anytime he wants with a match, but there are people after Luke. And he's starting to dimly put together these aren't normal people, but other than that, he really doesn't know who they are or why. And you can't be too harsh on them because if you were very young and hadn't been constantly overexposed to the gods, you wouldn't say, oh, I know who that is. It's clearly aimed at people who might know who the gods are. There was a bit of trouble for me because some of the names in English are different than the names I learned. Chu would be a name that Tyr goes by, and I'm like, that's a new one on me. But it apparently is a thing in England. I do believe this is England. Don't throw things if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's a thing. It's he was called Chu, so I really didn't know who he was for most of the novel. I'm like, who is this? And then the author does explain who the gods are in the back and what they've done. And the author's fairly good to Loki. Yes, Loki has done these things, but it's the most sympathetic explanation I ever saw of the death of Balder. It was just there was an impossible thing to be done, and who other than Loki would do this impossible thing? And the ending's a little sad because Loki and Wednesday. Yeah, he's named Wednesday here too. So when people said that was brilliant of Gaiman doing it, I'm like, this book was written in 75. They're going to be on opposite sides, and And spoiler alert, Segan is in the book before you ask, though you're probably not going to, you're going to kind of sort of recognize her, but you're not going to be sure. And there are others in the book too that are drawn from like outside sources of the strict Norse mythology, which you'll have to read to find out. Overall, it was like pretty good in how it dealt with Loki and how it dealt with the other gods. Thor comes off pretty good. Tyr does not come off good at all. You probably won't have any sympathy for Tyr at all. It's interesting here, the gods can hide their attributes. You couldn't tell Tyr was Tyr because you couldn't tell about something, and you couldn't tell Wednesday, well, obviously that's kind of obvious, but you couldn't be sure because he didn't look the way he traditionally looks and so forth and so on. Some people are going to be mad because Sleipnir is transformed into a fancy white car, and the Valkyries are never shown to be Valkyries, but it's a pretty good modern retelling. We have to remember, at the time they told these stories, they were wearing what would have passed for normal clothes. They wouldn't have looked supernatural, super Nordic to like the Norse or to the English or to whoever was telling the stories. And they were in Ireland and Germany and all over. They would have looked normal. I mean, they would have been gods, obviously, but they were gods of their time, which we don't have today, and we can't wrap our heads around. But they were gods of their time. They were current gods. Maybe the stories still sounded ancient to them at the time the religion was formulating, but they were still, you know, they looked like everyone around them. So I can totally get on board with them updating their appearance. I don't think when we die and we go to wherever we're going to go, it's going to look the same for everyone. I think everybody's probably going to see whatever they want or need to see. So it was a really good read. And again, it's only listed as a children's book because sometimes some stories are easier to sell to a children's market than an adult market, especially if you're not going to have swearing and lots of violence. You probably would not see the same story written today because children's stories today tend to have more swearing and violence in them, even those for younger readers, because as time has progressed, taste in how society views certain things have changed. I remember the books I read when I was little, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Those things would make this look like baby food, but it's still a really good story. And Loki comes out looking better, and you understand more of his nature than you do with a lot of the non-fiction books I have on him. Yeah, he did something that he should have went to jail for. You know, it was clever, but he went to jail for it anyhow. And they kept him down there too long, and he managed to escape, and they were going to send him back down. And you get, through David, you get to realize that, yeah, once David finally realizes Luke is Loki, he realizes he's done bad things, and he's probably going to continue doing bad things because he's Loki, but it didn't change how he felt for him. Loki's been extremely bad around here lately, to the point where I was going to open up the front door and cuff him by, scruff him by the back of the neck and throw him out. Not that it would have done any good, but I think that's kind of why the book arrived when it did. But yeah, he is a difficult god at times to deal with, and I kind of thought it was appropriate he was portrayed as a child, even though at one point David realizes you couldn't tell if he was a young person or older or what age he actually was, because there's a scene early on where it seems like he shapeshifts down in size, so he'll look like a child, and he can be childlike, meaning he's full of wonder, and he can be childish, which means he's being a brat. And it's worse coming off from a god, because what can you do? You can't paddle him. Well, you shouldn't paddle anybody, but you can't paddle him and go, now stand in the corner and think what you've done. That isn't going to work. Loki will sulk and then he'll plot revenge. You know he will. I mean, he's Loki. It doesn't do any good to punish him. So, and that's kind of what the book gets to. Punishing him all that time didn't do any good. One, we don't know why what happened, and in a lot of accounts, Loki wasn't even involved in 2. The only thing you're going to get out punishing Loki is make a resentful, sulky Loki. Nobody wants that, considering he's a god. So, yeah, it was a really good book. And I got a used edition of a library edition. I'm really sorry there was never, as far as I know, a follow-up book to this. If there is, let me know below. I'd really like to read a follow-up book to this. This is one of those books that kind of deserved a sequel because there was so much more that could have went on with all of the characters. And at the end, when David finally has everything he deserves, that he was, massive spoiler, being cheated out of, you feel sad that you're not going to get to see him go on with Astrid and possibly Luke, because it seems like Luke is sticking around. And it seems like the other gods are going to remain involved in his life. Where usually with fiction about the gods, a human encounters the gods, realizes they're gods, gets out of the experience and never wants to see them again, but they remain friends with him, which is nice. So if you guys like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you later. Bye bye.